our new doctors again. I'm James Hassel. And so this is a talk I've been asked to give pretty much every year in some iteration of it. So this is mostly for our new residents that are just coming in to learn a little bit about Kings County Hospital. But hopefully for the rest of you, if you haven't heard it recently, it'll be a little reminder about the place that we work. But I do always strive to not give the exact same thing every year. So I add a little something different every year throughout it. And you'll see what that is this year. So there's going to be a little primer on Kings County Hospital, a lot about the history of it, the hospital itself and our department, and a little bit on our residency program. So some disclosures, right? I'm not a historian. A lot of this is things that I've researched online, researched from books taken from the Brooklyn Public Library years ago, and some resources from the Museum of the City of New York. A lot from stories from faculty members and people who were living here during parts of the history that I'm talking about. So it might not be completely accurate, but it'll be pretty close to probably the way everything has occurred, at least to the best of my knowledge. But also the big disclosure is that I really love Kings County Hospital, right? So you got to keep that in mind as I'm talking about this, right? So someone else says different, remember that I love Kings County Hospital. I love working here. So much so, this is a little bit of an older photo, but I started trying to collect pieces of the history of this place. And I've been kind of finding and acquiring all these old staff photos and maps and pamphlets and all these things to try to preserve some of the history of the hospital and bring it back to Brooklyn so that it doesn't get lost to the rest of the world. So why do I care so much about this? Why have I decided to make this something that I really love? In tune with what modern lecture giving is, there's not gonna be a lot of words, right? It's gonna be all kind of photos. I'm gonna be talking, and normally I don't talk this much for my lectures, but for this one, since I'm giving some history, there's gonna be a little bit of talking here, so I apologize. But I wanted to tell you about how the hospital started, because I think it's really rooted in who we are as a program, and it's a big reason why I fell in love with this place when I came here. So in 1824, New York State put out an order, an ask, law, I guess, for every county to set aside land to be dedicated for caring for the poor in each of the counties of New York State. And in return, they were not going to tax this land, but instead they would allow the counties to tax all of the residents around the land to pay for the upkeep and the resources for that area, right? So it's that concept of the wealthy paying for the poor. Now, in truth, reading a little bit more about this, the government probably did this too, so that the counties would stop asking for assistance from the state government. And this was a way for them to get those resources, but still the idea of public welfare and those who are with providing for those who are without was kind of created, at least in the state of New York. And so a parcel of land was set aside, the exact land that the hospital was still sitting on, although it was even bigger, included farmland. It was donated by a family called the Martens family, who have a street named after them just south of here. And by 1830, the Brooklyn County or Kings County Almshouse was built. And anyone who did not have their own land or place to stay could stay here. So in 1857, a state senator was set out to actually go to every county in the state and see, all right, what did everybody do? Did they comply with what we asked? And what did they end up deciding to do? Because they were really given no direction. They just said, get this done and do with it what you see fit. And when this senator came to the Kings County almshouse, they noticed that in addition to the almshouse, there had been a psychiatric asylum and a hospital built on the property as well. Because unsurprisingly, as you can imagine, even comparing to today, a lot of those who were poor had mental illness or had health illness. And so they decided, the leaders had decided, we need this on this property as well. Now, initially, it sounds like the conditions were not great, right? It still wasn't really well funded. And it was a tough place to live. You did the opportunity to work on the farmland to help earn your money and earn your keep. But some of the earlier accounts were not so great. But by the time the senator had visited, it's probably just the weekly projector shutdown. But by the time the senator visited, he actually noticed there was a lot of progressive things happening here that had not necessarily been happening around the country for that psychiatric hospital. At the time, the method of treatment, was padded rooms and restriction and straitjackets. And here, all the patients were allowed to kind of walk outside and actually walk the grounds because they felt, hey, look, actually patients do better when we treat them like humans and less like objects that need to be confined. And so that really set off a long line of what that property was for. It was really for the underserved. Everything was for the underserved, right? This hospital, the almshouse, it was all dedicated to caring for the underserved. And that message was really been the driving force. It's really been the mission statement of Kings County Hospital. And that's kind of highlighted by this building there now. So the almshouse apparently was created in 1830 somehow, though someone has decided that the hospital itself was formed in 1831. So in 1931, at the 100-year anniversary of Kings County, the mayor set up a day to kind of inaugurate, and they put aside some money to build this in front of the B building. And the A, B, and C building over there are still the original buildings that were there from 1831. But this stone entryway was built in 1931. And to commemorate on the day to celebrate the centennial, right? Which also means in 2031, we will be having our 200-year anniversary. So it's actually coming up pretty soon. So on the outside, right, they have all these inscriptions and names of famous doctors and physicians over the course of history. But what's more interesting is what's on the inside. And you guys should all see it. And for my residents who have been here who haven't seen it, you really should take time to go look at it, in my opinion. There's a famous inscription around underneath the ceiling there. That was the dedication given that day. And so it says, let all who serve here remember that this building is dedicated by the city of New York to the care of all who are helpless and afflicted, this before all else. So it was reaffirming 100 years later, remember that it's not about money or this or that or the other thing. This place we're rededicating, let's remember that everything we do here should be about caring for the helpless and afflicted, this before anything else. And you do see throughout history a lot of amazing achievements and progress made at Kings County Hospital, I think really in the spirit of that dedication. The first legislation that was successfully lobbied for family planning done by a physician at Kings County Hospital. Research for importance of vaccinations for patients with sickle cell disease. The first open heart surgery, the first MRI images obtained of a human, the first hemodialysis machine. These were all innovations that were being encouraged in order to maintain that spirit of that dedication. Now, that doesn't mean that everything has gone smoothly, right? And that there haven't been blips and hiccups all throughout history, because there has been. But anytime I've read or seen or researched about any of these things, you see a rebound, you see a real response to correct that. Because everybody throughout history seems to have really kept in mind that when we falter from that path, that we need to correct it and fix it. And there's probably no better example for us with that than how our emergency department was created. So now we're going to go into some more modern history. So our department was created out of something called the Crown Heights race riots in 1991. And these riots lasted for, I think, 2 days or 3 days. I'm not going to go through the whole history of that, but I'm going to detail how it started and how that actually led to the creation of our emergency department. So in August of 1991, there was a young boy named Gavin Cato, who was the son of Guyanese immigrants. He was riding his bike with one of his family members on President Street in Crown Heights, kind of by Utica, and his bike chain fell off. So he went off to the side of the road on the sidewalk or whatever it was to fix his bike chain. And at the same time, there was a procession happening by one of the prominent rabbis in the community. And this was a procession led by some police cars and a train of cars. And so as they were crossing Utica, the light was changing red, and one of the cars in the procession was falling behind. And that car figured, hey, we're in a procession. It's an official thing. I can speed up and go through the red light to make sure I don't lose sight of all cars. But as he sped up, right, the light changed green on the other side, a car hit him, and his car sped off the road. hit into a giant stone, either pillar or embankment, and it toppled over and it crushed Gavin Cato and killed him. Now, everyone living in that area heard this. This was a big accident. This huge stone thing crumpled over. And so a lot of people came outside, and a lot of the residents were immediately upset. And because of the race of the child that was killed, and the race, the driver that was driving the car, and a lot of discord started happening. Now, what happened next is really the crux of what started the riots, though. And there's different accounts. I've read like different articles and different things about it. There's a lot of history about it. But something along the lines of that everyone agrees on is that the first ambulance on the scene was a volunteer ambulance from the community, run by the Jewish community. And the first person that was transported out was the driver that was in the car. And the accounts were saying that they didn't seem to put a big attempt in trying to lift this 600-pound stone from the child before taking this driver away. And then about 8 minutes later, the city ambulance came. Took a while to get this stone off. Gavin, as I said, was already dead. There was nothing you could do. And they transported him to Kings County, where he was pronounced dead. But the people in the community who saw everything saw this as a potential racial injustice, that the first responder wasn't someone trying to help Gavin, and that the private volunteer ambulance took this gentleman to a private hospital where Gavin went to the public hospital. And this really triggered and probably boiled over racial tensions that were already existing in the community. And so that group of people started a riot and started marching around the neighborhood, looting and damaging things. So that leads us to this gentleman, Yankel Rosenbaum. So he was a student completing his doctorate here in Brooklyn, and he was from Australia, I think. And as the riots were occurring, a group of people saw him, and they decided to attack him and stab him. And so police came and they apprehended a few people, but he was taken to Kings County Hospital as well. This happened about 3 hours after Gavin had been brought in. So at that time, we did not have a emergency department, in the sense that we did not have emergency medicine physicians running an emergency department, which was typical for around this time. It was not a formally accepted specialty in a lot of places, or hadn't been developed yet. And so this would be run by trauma surgeons, by medical internists. So he was brought in, and most of the trauma team was upstairs dealing with some other massive traumas apparently that had already happened in other neighborhoods unrelated to the riots that night. And so there was I think a junior resident or something manning the emergency department, and they had started to sort of treat Yankel Rosenbaum. But by the time the team, an hour or two later, had come out of the operating room and come down to see him, they noticed that he was in shock and he was exsanguinating, because it had been missed that he had been stabbed in either the chest or the back, and he was bleeding out. And he only had a small IV in his hand. He hadn't been really given any blood. He had been under resuscitated. And by the time they attended to him and rushed him to the operating room, he died. And because this was something that occurred in the wake of these riots that had just started, this garnered a lot of attention. Now you should all read about the riots. It was a really sad and crazy event. It was really mismanaged by the city of New York and the mayor, and it led to a lot of downstream effects politically. But what it led to us was a decree that we should have a formal emergency department run by emergency medicine physicians to make sure that the patients of the community were getting the proper care, the correct care that they deserve. And so it garnered a lot of attention, right? The negative attention, as I said, every once in a while, you're going to see negative blips, but the response was to improve and be better. And I think clearly it has, because our department, I think, has been a remarkable change to the way that we deliver care. And because of that, it was also decided we should create a residency to train emergency medicine physicians and train them in the way that that we are working, which is really under that mantra, that dedication, that mission for serving the underserved. And so that's where all of you come in to now the ongoing history of this hospital. And that's where I had started with my history. And that's where I really started getting pride in trying to be a part and contribute to the lineage of Kings County Hospital, and now of our emergency department. Right, so what is our department, our program committed to do for all of you new doctors, right? Yes, we want to train you to be the classic doctor, the one that rushes down the hallway on the TV show, talking to the patient while the family members behind as the doors slowly close and you don't know what happens to them. But it's more than just the amazing clinical practice that we're training to do here. We want physicians that look like this, educators, reading the evidence, deciding what's necessary and what's not just straight algorithmic thinking, thinking about who your patients really are and what they need, and training each other in updates and not getting stuck in old ways. We want doctors that look like this, fighting for justice, advocating, taking a role in what wasn't traditionally something physicians were encouraged to do, but something that we are encouraging you to do every day, and something that we really celebrate. And sort of these all are the pillars that make up what we call our clinical monsters, right? You're not just amazing doctors, you are clinical monsters that excel in so many other areas that you can affect. And as you all continue to meet alumni from our program, you'll see they go on to do amazing things that far surpass anything I will probably ever accomplish. And that is what the history of this program, in my opinion, will really be. So to me, when I heard all this, I'm like, man, this is great. I'm excited. And this is why I fell in love with this place. And right, this is the part where you should all be really excited. And you should all just go out there and know that absolutely nothing will be bad the next 4 or 5 years. And how could anything go wrong with the way everything is done? Well, okay, right? Let's get rid of some of my bias here, right? And let's talk that there, of course, is no perfect place anywhere, and that includes here. So what will I admit to here in a public setting? Some of these are things you heard yesterday. You know, this is not a glamorous job. This is a messy job, right? You could pick a lot of other professions, even in the world of medicine, that will be maybe a little bit more easy to swallow. You'll get maybe a little bit more credit, a little more congratulations from the world around us. Right, we had blips of this during the pandemic, and then it just kind of goes away, as many things do for most things. But it's not the easiest profession to show up and kind of smooth through. And part of that is we work in a very busy place. There's a parade of patients and stretchers out in the hallway that the moment you discharge one, there's 3 that's ready to be put in that. You're going to be seeing patients in chairs just as an effort to get everybody in so they're in front of you so that you can take care of them. Your backs are going to hurt from kneeling down. Mine certainly does. You can ask the seniors about this. But it can feel overwhelming. And sometimes you finish your shift and you worked your butt off and you did a lot of work, and that board looks even worse than when you came in. You think, dang, I don't know if I really affected any change here today. And I think Dr. Youssef said this really great yesterday to you all. We're not, I wouldn't say we're a resource poor institution, but we are certainly resource conscious, because the well is not infinitely deep and it can run dry if we are not careful. And we will not then be able to deliver the care that we're trying to if we're not being very judicious with what we do have. And that can make it really frustrating too, because you may think, man, if I have a different place, it's got all these private donors and all these things. I've got 2 MRI machines running 24/7 and excess staff everywhere. Maybe I could deliver better care. And you may say, is this really the right place to do all these things? So what have I done then to still maintain my optimism and stay on all these years and hopefully retire here after all these years, and not lose sight of why I love working here? All right, so this is where I talk about some things I kind of try to explore every year about what I have done for myself to be in this, what some people call insane state of optimism for the hospital. And I think this year I really wanted to talk about the concept of humanism during your shifts. I'd like to think, as all of you reflect on why you wanted to become doctors, or specifically emergency medicine physicians, somewhere there is a common statement about how we wanted to help our fellow neighbors, help our fellow people of our community, whoever they may be. And that's really rooted in the concept of humanism, right? The philosophy that really focuses on human values and concerns, and it really prioritizes the idea that all humans are good, all humans have great potential, and that we really should be using common sense when treating each other to figure out the best way to solve problems. That it can be hard to maintain this viewpoint when you're in a difficult work setting, like any emergency department, and you can lose sight of sometimes your humanism, your humanistic qualities. So this is an article I read a long time ago and completely forgot about it, if I'm being honest, until this past graduation when one of our alumni, Dr. Ronnie Rivera, had kind of re-brought it up again. It's like, oh, I should really look at that again. I kind of forgot about this because it was a long time ago. It wasn't, I don't think I read it the year it came out, but it was certainly when I was a resident. And it's not an incredibly in-depth sort of research paper, but they looked at 16 internal medicine physicians who had been identified as physicians who were highly humanistic, and they wanted to explore what are the common threads that allowed them to maintain their humanism years into their practice and sustain it. And they had asked them to identify different attitudes that they held every day, kind of showcased, as well as habits that they practiced in order to not lose their humanistic side. And what the authors also found were there were three other kind of, I guess, factors or themes that they identify from all this. And that is that you need to deliberately work on maintaining your ideals of humanism. That it's not something that comes naturally to some people, which is what I've been accused of. No one's like me, Hassel. You can't expect anybody to love things like this. You're crazy. But yeah, I have to work at it too. And so you can do it, but you have to keep working at it. But you do need support from outside the hospital in your other parts of your life in order to maintain your humanism. And that it can be an antidote to burnout, which I think we would all agree that's probably true. And I think that's a big reason why I'm still not burnt out so many years into my practice. I think maintaining humanism is a big part. So I wanted to I could talk about really any one of these, but I just wanted to highlight one of them because I think it's something quick that we can talk about today and something that I want all my new doctors to consider incorporating from the very beginning from your practice. And that is this concept of seeking connection with your patients. So, right, we cannot spend a huge amount of time with each of our patients, right? We've got to be efficient. We've got to figure out what's going on. We've got to make a workup plan. But it doesn't mean you can't find a very, very, very brief moment to try and connect with your patient. And I would say on a level that is unrelated to anything with their medical complaint or condition that day. And if I had a microphone recording me on my shifts and you heard what I talk about as I walk around all the patients, invariably, multiple times, there are certain questions I ask a majority of the patients that day as a way for me to connect with my patients. And it's important to know we're talking about seeking connection with your patients, not even necessarily making that strong connection. The idea is that you can just attempt to make a connection, and it's something that's going to benefit you and hopefully benefit your patient, but might just be something that benefits you to maintain your humanism. So, as I said, I have a few questions I ask standard to a lot of patients to start this idea of how can I connect with them. But I want to know to any of my residents or any of the faculty here, do any of you have anything that you find yourself asking from time to time, unrelated to your history and physical, to try to make a connection to your patient in a brief period of time? If you don't, it's okay, but.
Not like a question, but I'm actively trying to learn like a little bit of patient Creole. It's really nice to connect with people who are very different than myself. It's been a lot of satisfying. The basic introduction. And saying I need an interpreter, it means a lot to me. It means a lot of satisfaction.
I often ask like where are you from? I think like especially because I obviously don't look like I'm from the West Indies or Caribbean. A lot of patients will be like, oh, I was visiting back home. They're like, oh, where back home? They'll say like, oh, the Caribbean. And I'll say like, where? The Caribbean. Which country? And then they'll tell me, and I think they appreciate that I'm interested enough to know which country, as opposed to just saying, oh, they're Caribbean, somewhere in that area. So I do that pretty consistently.
Cool.
I guess with the family, children, spouses.
Right? Because maybe something you can relate to, right? You got family, right? And so sometimes that's good, right? Ask a layup question that you may be able to follow up with and actually provide something to follow back with.
I like to ask the really old people what the secret is to an old life. Yeah, they blush and they like.
Yes, I love that one too. And when they're married and they're there with their spouse, I always ask what's the secret to a long marriage. I love that one too, because I get to hear a lot of great funny stories and interesting clips from everybody, right? And that's something you can ask really quickly. So the things I like to ask standard are, how far do you live from the hospital, right? Because then my next thing I can say, oh, what neighborhood do you live in? Because I have lived in and around these hospitals my entire time, pretty much I've been here. And so based on our catchment area, I probably know or have lived in most of these neighborhoods. And so it's something I can connect with. For me, because now they might even be my neighbor. I can't tell you how many times patients say, oh, I live at this place. Oh yeah, you're like my neighbor. You live 8 blocks away from me. And something I can kind of say like you truly are my neighbor. I love asking where you're from. Right, we have a big population of patients who are immigrants. And I think it's something that many of our patients wear with pride. And I think just asking that and even learning 1 or 2 things about what city they live in is just something you can carry forward to the next visit. I love asking where you work, or if you're retired, what do you used to do for your job? Not everyone may have loved their job, but I think everyone, works hard in life. And I think kind of acknowledging that and knowing what else they do in their daily life really helps me to connect. And there's a few other things, but those are the main ones that I ask. Now, look, we don't have time, as I said, to sit and write a Humans of New York article about each one of our patients, right? But I will ask my questions medically, ask the patient, do you have anything else you want to ask me? And then right before I leave, that's when I say one of these things. Hey, how far do you live from the hospital? And I can finish with that. Because I've already gotten everything I need. I've made sure that all their medical concerns are answered. I know that I can just take my 1 to 2 minutes to talk to them really briefly. Maybe it's the last thing they'll kind of remember as I leave the room, kind of that recency bias from the patient of something that I asked. And I don't know if that 1 to 2 minutes really is enough for them to feel connected to me. I hope it does to some extent, but it does make me feel connected to them. It helps me remember the human I'm taking care of, and that it's not the thing that we all do, including me still. Oh, our patient in 18 on the right. Oh, our patient with the headache and the vomiting, right? We really should be thinking first of, this is a member of our patient, Mrs. So-and-so, our patient with those symptoms, Mr. So-and-so, right? We should really be highlighting the person when we're trying to recall them to each other. And as I said, I still do that. I'm still going to do that in front of you, but it's something I always try to work on. And by me making this connection, it does help remind me about the human I'm taking care of and keeps me up with my humanism.
Yeah, and I think besides remembering that everybody is human and should be treated with respect, everybody is interesting. And I hate when someone says, oh, this is an interesting case, or this person was only a stroke, or only, not an interesting case. And when I was a student at Jacobi on internal medicine clerkship, there was a guy who, my intern, who was kind of old school stuff, saying, oh, this is not an interesting case, but you can go get a history from him. So I went to see this guy, a Hispanic guy, and his daughter was there. And I said, what did he do for a living before he had the stroke in the past? And he turned out that he had been a matador in Spain and was a friend of Hemingway's, and showed me a picture of Hemingway. So everybody is interesting.
Yeah.
If they're not interesting to you, they're interesting to their family or somebody else. So I think that's important to remember.
I agree. So, I give this to hopefully inspire you all on day one, right? To be excited, to remember a little something. And if you're ever interested in that article, it's a short read. It's just a couple quick highlights, just 16 attending the provider thing, but that all things that I think really resonate with me, something you should keep in mind to keep yourselves boosted. There's definitely erosion that happens over the years, right, guys? It's not something that's easy to maintain over the years. I'm not delusional, but I think it's something to really think about what you can do on your shift to help prevent burnout in your long-term career. And that's the one I decided on it. So I wanted to end here, though. You all heard some pretty famous quotes and sayings that have been passed down over the years here. And there's a few more that I wanted to add. I didn't know how many were to be said yesterday, but I believe they get said. And part of this is going to be for some of our long-term residents, long-term faculty, to see if you can recognize maybe some of these came from. These are just a few last little things to hopefully inspire you guys. You'll learn the background behind them even more as you go throughout the years. And we'll see how many of these really have lived on in all of our minds, because these have always for me. Some of these were from before I was a resident and I was told about it as part of the teaching. Some of them were made during my residency and have lived on, and some are ones that have been more recent and started after I was a resident as an attending that I've really kept with me, that I'm really hoping continue to be one of the many famous quotes of our training here. All right, so never lie, right? Which doctor? Dr. Stefan Rinnert, one of my first mentors, and one of the great programmers of this program. Don't suck. Yeah. Rule 1 of Doty's laws. And he has updated his Doty's laws to include another 10 since I've last known him. So, but number 1 is always don't stop. And there's a good story behind that. Remember your why, right? You guys all heard this yesterday. This is what Dr. Smith-Balil talks about now with you when you first come in and with the graduating residents as they leave. And actually, to that point, still in my bag that I carry every day, I still have my card that I wrote. This is not something she did when I was a resident. It was something she had started doing when I was an attending. And I did one of those, and I still keep that card with me. And she's right. Every once in a while, it's nice to find that in your bag every year or 2 years as you're rummaging through. And it kind of reminds you on why you decided to do all this. Be nice.
Dr. G.
One of about 1,000 things I've learned from Dr. Gernsheimer. Some are even in Yiddish, right? Which now I've had to learn from some of your sayings. But I think this might be the most famous and recognizable of his teachings, I think, to all of us. Now, the big deep cut of today, be irreverent. This was a line said by the very infamous Mad Dog, Dr. Dennehy, at his graduation speech. A man of also 1,000 quotes, and 999 I cannot say in a public setting. This is about the only one I can say. And if you're interested in the legend of the Mad Dog, definitely talk to me in some of the older attendings. We can tell you some wild stories and where be irreverent comes from. Eat the frog. This is the newest of my favorite, hopefully legendary sayings with Dr. Benson tells the new PGY1s every year. And you should ask her about it. I think she tells a really good story about it. I'm hoping she continues to say it because I would like this to be ingrained in our culture. More patience, more learning. Dr. Sinner, who you'll be working with, something that I still think rings true to this day and is a really important training. And if there's one saying I want you all to remember from today and for your training, and as you're an alumni, it is remember this before all else. Any questions? Thank you.